right. Good morning, boys and girls, and welcome back to Pitt Street. And we are really excited. Today we are going to finish up chapter 16 and move on to chapter 17 in the miraculous journey of Edward Tulane. So yesterday we were looking to see about the conversation that Edward had with the stars. And you all did a great job, and the stars were up in their constellations together, and then Edward told them that he had been loved before, and the stars responded by saying, so what difference does that make when you're alone now? And you guys had some really nice responses to that. And then you told me about what your conversation would be like if you were talking to the stars. And then what caused Edward to have feelings of joy? He heard the harmonica, and Bryce removed him from the post. And when Edward fell forward into Bryce's arms, he felt a rush of relief and a feeling of relief that was followed by joy. And then our last one was making a connection. And if you were able to fly, where would you go and how would it change your life? And you guys had a lot of really interesting ideas. So today we are going to be reading chapter 17, and our chapter 17 questions are: describe the house that Sarah, Ruth, and Bryce live in, and then describe the feelings or emotion that Edward had when Bryce handed him to Sarah Ruth. And then our writing prompt today is that good readers make connections to what they're reading to their own lives. Bryce seems to calm his sister by playing the harmonica. What type of instrument or music would calm you if you were sick? And give me a little bit of an explanation. Make sure you're using capitalization and punctuation. Some of you are forgetting that. Others, you're doing a great job. And even though some of you are forgetting, your answers have been very enlightening. So chapter 17. Bryce slung Edward over his shoulder. He started to walk. I come to get you for Sarah Ruth, Bryce said. You don't know Sarah Ruth. She's my sister. She's sick. She had a baby doll made out of china, and she loved that baby doll. But he broke her. He broke it. He was drunk, and he stepped on the baby's head and smashed it into 100 million pieces. The pieces were so small, I couldn't make them go back together. I couldn't. I tried and tried. At this point in the story, Bryce stopped walking and shook his head and wiped his nose from the back of his hand. Sarah Ruth ain't had nothing to play with since. He won't buy her nothing. He says she don't need nothing. He said she don't need nothing because she ain't gonna live. But he don't know. Bryce started to walk again. He don't know, he said. But who he was not clear to Edward. What was clear was that he was being taken to a child to make up for the loss of a doll. A doll! How Edward loathed dolls. And to be thought of as a likely replacement for a doll offended him. But still, it was, he had to admit, a highly preferable alternative to hanging by his ears from a post. The house in which Bryce and Sarah Ruth lived was so small and crooked that Edward did not believe at first that it was a house. He mistook it instead for a chicken coop. Inside, there were 2 beds and a kerosene lamp, and not much else. Bryce laid Edward on the foot of the bed, and then he lit the lamp. Sarah, Bryce whispered. Sarah Ruth, you gotta wake up now, honey. I brung you something. He took the harmonica out of his pocket and played the beginning of a simple melody. The little girl sat up in her bed and immediately started to cough. Bryce put his hand on her back. That's all right, he told her. That's okay. She was young, maybe 4 years old, and she had white blonde hair, and even in the poor light of the lamp, Edward could see that her eyes were the same gold-flecked brown as Bryce's. That's right, said Bryce. You go on ahead and cough. Sarah Ruth obliged him. She coughed and coughed and coughed. On the wall of the cabin, the kerosene light cast her trembling shadow hunched over and small. The coughing was the saddest sound Edward had ever heard, sadder even than the mournful call of the whippoorwill. Finally, Sarah Ruth stopped. Bryce said, "You want to see what I brung you?" Sarah Ruth nodded. "You got to close your eyes." The girl closed her eyes. Bryce picked up Edward and held him so that he was standing straight like a soldier at the end of the bed. "All right now, you can open them." Sarah Ruth opened her eyes, and Bryce moved Edward's china legs and china arms so it looked as if he were dancing. Sarah Ruth laughed and clapped her hands. "Rabbit," she said. "He's for you, honey," said Bryce. Sarah Ruth looked first at Edward, and then at Bryce, and then back at Edward again, her eyes wide and disbelieving. "He's yours." "Mine?" Sarah Ruth, Edward was soon to discover, rarely said more than one word at a time. Words, at least, several of them strung together, made her cough. She limited herself. She said only what needed to be said. "Yours," said Bryce. "I got him special for you." This knowledge provoked another fit of coughing in Sarah Ruth, and she hunched over again. When the fit was over, she uncurled herself and held out her arms. "That's right," said Bryce. He handed Edward to her. "Baby," said Sarah Ruth. She rocked Edward back and forth and stared down at him and smiled. Never in his life had Edward been cradled like a baby. Abilene had never done it, nor had Nellie, and most certainly Bull had not. It was a singular sensation to be held so gently and so fiercely, and to be stared down at with so much love. Edward felt the whole of his china body flood with warmth. "You are going to give him a name, honey?" Bryce asked. "Jangles," said Sarah Ruth without taking her eyes off of Edward. "Jangles, huh? That's a good name. I like that name." Bryce patted Sarah Ruth on the head, and she continued to stare down at Edward. "Hush," she said to Edward as she rocked him back and forth. "From the minute I first seen him," said Bryce, "I knew he belonged to you. I said to myself, that rabbit is for Sarah Ruth for sure." "Jangles," murmured Sarah Ruth. Outside the cabin, thunder cracked, and then came the sound of the rain falling on the tin roof. Sarah Ruth rocked Edward back and forth, and Bryce took out his harmonica and started to play, making his song keep rhythm with the rain. All right, so remember your questions are: describe the house that Sarah Ruth and Bryce lived in. Describe the feeling of emotion that Edward had when Bryce handed him to Sarah Ruth. And then, for your writing activity, you're making a connection that good readers make with their own lives. Bryce seems to calm his sister by playing the harmonica. What type of instrument or music would calm you if you were sick? Try to give a little bit of detail about the music and how it would make you feel. I hope you guys are having a great Thursday. Take care, and I will see you, well, I won't see you tomorrow, but you'll get to hear the next chapter. Take care.